The world tilted on its axis the moment I saw the picture. It was a candid shot, carelessly posted online, of my husband, James, standing beneath a floral archway, his hand intertwined with another woman's. They were beaming, lost in a bubble of sickening happiness, and behind them stood his entire family, faces I'd shared holidays with, birthdays, and countless Sunday dinners. Faces that now seemed alien, their smiles mocking the years of loyalty and devotion I had poured into their lives. They thought they had outsmarted me. They believed I would crumble. If you've ever felt your heart ripped out by those closest to you, subscribe now and become part of our family, because true family stands together against betrayal. My name is Grace, and for 15 years I had built a life with James, a life I believed was woven with shared dreams and unwavering commitment. We had weathered storms, celebrated triumphs, and built a beautiful home, both literally and figuratively. Our sprawling estate, nestled in the hills overlooking the city, was more than just bricks and mortar. It was a symbol of our success, our love, our future. Or so I thought. The photograph was a jagged shard of glass through that illusion, tearing it apart to reveal a reality I couldn't have imagined in my darkest nightmares. The caption, a casual announcement of their joyous union, felt like a physical blow. The air in my lungs thinned and the room began to spin. I could feel the crimson rising in my cheeks, a mixture of fury and humiliation. They expected tears, a dramatic confrontation, a scene. They wanted to witness my pain, to revel in their victory. But I refused to give them the satisfaction. Instead, a cold, steely resolve settled within me. They had underestimated me. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness. They were about to learn a very harsh lesson. I closed my laptop, the image of their blissful faces seared into my mind, and began to make a plan. A plan that would dismantle their happiness, brick by brick. The days that followed were a blur of calculated actions. I consulted with lawyers, meticulously gathering documents, and quietly orchestrating the sale of our $15 million estate. James was supposedly on a business trip, conveniently absent to finalize his secret wedding. His family, complicit in this elaborate deception, continued to send me saccharine messages, inquiring about his well-being and offering empty platitudes. I played along, a hollow smile plastered on my face, my responses carefully crafted to betray nothing. Inside, I was a whirlwind of controlled fury, channeling my energy into dismantling the life we had built together, the life he so carelessly discarded. Every phone call, every email, every signature was a step closer to my ultimate goal, to leave him with nothing but the consequences of his actions. The silence was my weapon. The calm was my disguise. They assumed I was ignorant, heartbroken, defeated. They had no idea that I was quietly erasing them from my life. The person I trusted most was his own mother. She had always treated me like a daughter, confiding in me, sharing family secrets. I believed our bond was unbreakable. Yet there she was, beaming in the background of that photograph, her arm linked with the new bride's mother, a picture of familial bliss that excluded me entirely. It was her betrayal that stung the deepest, a cruel reminder that even the closest relationships can be built on lies. It solidified my resolve. There would be no mercy, no regrets, only justice. The house sale was finalized just days before James was due to return with his new bride. The timing was impeccable. They were expecting a homecoming, a celebration, a life of comfort and luxury in the home we had built together. Instead, they were about to face the cold, hard reality of their choices. The first sleepless night was the worst. The silence of the empty house amplified the betrayal, each tick of the grandfather clock in the hall a hammer blow against my sanity. Memories flickered like a broken film reel, James and I planting rose bushes in the garden, our laughter echoing through the halls during holiday gatherings, the quiet intimacy of sharing a bottle of wine by the fireplace. Now those memories were tainted, poisoned by the knowledge that he had been living a double life, that our entire relationship had been a carefully constructed lie. I tossed and turned, the silk sheets feeling like sandpaper against my skin, the scent of his cologne on the pillows a cruel reminder of his absence. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the photograph, his beaming face, her possessive hand on his arm, their families united in a celebration of my destruction. I tried to reason with myself to find some semblance of understanding, but there was none. How could he do this? How could he betray me so completely, so callously? The questions spiraled in my mind, unanswered, unanswerable. Finally, as the first rays of dawn crept through the curtains, I rose from the bed, exhausted but resolute. Tears were a luxury I couldn't afford. I had a plan to execute, and I wouldn't let my emotions derail me. I focused on the logistics, the legal paperwork, the meticulous planning that would bring about his downfall. It was the only thing that kept me from unraveling completely. I attempted to contact James, feigning ignorance, a desperate attempt to salvage some shred of dignity. I told him about the urgent matter that required his immediate attention, a vague reference to the house sale that I knew would send him spiraling. His response was dismissive, a hurried text message claiming he was unavailable and would call me later. That was all the confirmation I needed. He had chosen her. He had chosen them. He had sacrificed 15 years of our life together for a fleeting moment of passion, a reckless gamble that would cost him everything. I deleted his number from my phone, severing the last remaining tie to the man I thought I knew. There was no turning back now. The die had been cast. The game had begun. I reached out to his brother, Mark, someone I'd always considered a friend. I hinted at financial difficulties, painting a picture of impending ruin, hoping to gauge their reaction, to understand the depth of their deception. Mark's response was equally chilling, a mixture of concern and thinly veiled curiosity, a clear indication that they were aware of James's actions and were waiting to see how it would all unfold. The realization that his entire family had conspired against me was a knife twist, a deeper wound than James's betrayal itself. They had all played a part in this elaborate charade, their smiles and gestures of affection nothing more than a carefully crafted performance. I ended the call, the weight of their treachery crushing me. The world felt cold, alien, and utterly devoid of trust. The days turned into weeks, each one a grueling test of my resolve. I moved out of our estate, taking only a few personal belongings, photographs, journals, and mementos that represented the life I was leaving behind. The house, once a sanctuary of love and laughter, now felt like a prison, haunted by the ghosts of our shattered dreams. I found a small apartment in the city, a temporary refuge where I could lick my wounds and strategize my next move. The anonymity of the city was comforting, a stark contrast to the suffocating scrutiny of James's family and our social circle. I spent hours poring over legal documents, consulting with my lawyers, and meticulously planning my financial strategy. I learned about hidden assets, offshore accounts, and the intricate web of deceit that James had woven to conceal his infidelity. The more I discovered, the more enraged I became. He had not only betrayed me emotionally, but had also systematically plundered our shared resources, leaving me with a fraction of what I was rightfully owed. The injustice was staggering. The need for retribution burned within me, a relentless fire that fueled my every action. I knew that my revenge had to be calculated, precise, and utterly devastating. It had to be more than just financial ruin. It had to expose their lies, shatter their reputations, and leave them with nothing but the bitter taste of their own treachery. They had underestimated me. They had mistaken my silence for weakness. They were about to learn the true meaning of karma. The day James arrived back at what he thought was our asterisk home marked the beginning of their downfall. I watched from afar, a ghost in their paradise as they pulled up to the gates, his new bride clinging to his arm, his family trailing behind in a convoy of luxury cars. They looked confident, smug even, their faces radiant with anticipation. The gates remained closed. A security guard, hired that morning, approached their vehicle and handed James a letter. I could see the confusion on his face as he read the contents, his brow furrowing, his lips tightening. The bride looked on, her smile faltering. The family began to murmur amongst themselves, their initial excitement replaced with apprehension. The letter was simple, direct, and devastating. The house had been sold. The proceeds had been placed in a trust, accessible only under very specific conditions, conditions that I knew they could never meet. They were homeless, penniless, exposed. The carefully constructed facade of their perfect life was crumbling before their eyes. The scene unfolded like a twisted play, the actors oblivious to the true nature of their roles. James stepped out of the car, his face a mask of fury, and began shouting at the security guard, demanding answers, threatening legal action. The guard remained impassive, unmoved by his outburst. The bride started to cry, her mascara streaking down her face, her perfect image shattered. The family stood by, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief. They had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. Their world had been turned upside down. I watched until the last car had driven away, their dreams of a happy ending dissolving into the dust of the road. It was only the beginning. I had much more planned. The following weeks were a descent into darkness. The emptiness of my new apartment mirrored the hollowness within me. I lost my appetite, barely able to stomach more than a few bites of food each day. Sleep became a luxury, haunted by nightmares of James and his new bride, their faces contorted with malice, their voices echoing with accusations. I withdrew from my friends, isolating myself from their well-meaning attempts to comfort me. I felt like a broken doll, discarded and forgotten, my once vibrant spirit crushed beneath the weight of betrayal. The silence was deafening, broken only by the incessant ticking of the clock, a constant reminder of the passage of time, the time I had wasted on a lie. I replayed every moment of our 15-year relationship, searching for clues, for signs that I had missed, for any indication of his deception. But there was nothing. He had been a master manipulator, weaving a web of lies so intricate that even I, his closest confidant, had been unable to detect it. The realization was crushing, a testament to his cunning and my own naivete. I began to question everything I had ever believed in, every relationship I had ever cherished. Was it all a lie? Was everyone capable of such treachery? The doubt gnawed at me, eroding my trust in humanity, leaving me feeling vulnerable and exposed. I considered giving up, surrendering to the despair that threatened to consume me. I imagined retreating to a remote cabin in the woods, severing all ties to the outside world and simply fading away. But then I thought of them, James, his bride, his family, reveling in their victory, enjoying the fruits of their deception. The image ignited a spark of defiance within me, a refusal to be defeated. I would not let them win. I would not allow them to destroy me. One rainy afternoon, I found myself wandering aimlessly through the city streets, lost in a sea of anonymous faces. The gray sky mirrored my mood, the relentless downpour washing away the last vestiges of hope. I stumbled into a small coffee shop, seeking refuge from the storm. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the murmur of conversation provided a momentary distraction from my inner turmoil. I ordered a latte and sat by the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. As I sipped my coffee, I overheard a conversation between two women at the next table. They were discussing a recent scandal involving a prominent businessman who had been exposed for fraud and embezzlement. They spoke of his downfall with a mixture of schadenfreude and fascination, marveling at the intricate details of his scheme and the devastating consequences he had faced. Their words struck a chord within me. I realized that James's betrayal was not just a personal affront, it was a crime. He had not only broken my heart but had also systematically defrauded me, concealing assets and manipulating finances to deprive me of what was rightfully mine. The realization sparked a new sense of purpose within me. I would not just seek revenge, I would seek justice. I would expose his lies, uncover his secrets, and hold him accountable for his actions. I finished my coffee, a newfound resolve hardening my gaze. The rain had stopped, and a sliver of sunlight peeked through the clouds. I stepped out of the coffee shop, a sense of clarity washing over me. The victim was gone. The planner had arrived. That night I couldn't sleep. I went to the living room and turned on the television. It was a late-night news program. The anchor began talking about a local charity event that James and his family were involved in. Pictures flashed on the screen of them smiling, shaking hands, and posing for photos with dignitaries. They looked so polished, so respectable, so utterly detached from the devastation they had caused. It was too much. I felt the rage rise up inside me, a molten lava of fury that threatened to erupt. I grabbed a glass from the shelf and hurled it against the wall, the shattering glass a release for my pent-up emotions. Then another and another, until the floor was covered in shards of glass, reflecting the distorted image of my own face. I sank to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably, the weight of my grief and anger crushing me. I was broken, shattered, destroyed. As the sobs subsided, a strange calm settled over me. I looked at the broken glass on the floor, each shard a reflection of the pieces of my life that had been shattered by James's betrayal. And in that moment, I knew what I had to do. I would take those shattered pieces and rebuild something stronger, something more resilient, something that would make them pay. I stood up, my legs shaky but my resolve firm. I would not let them break me. I would use their treachery as fuel, as motivation, as a weapon. I would turn their betrayal into their undoing. The floor may have been covered in broken glass, but in my heart, the seeds of revenge had been sown. It was time to get to work. I started small, focusing on gathering information. I hired a private investigator, a discreet and resourceful individual who specialized in uncovering hidden assets and exposing financial misconduct. I provided him with every document I had, every lead I could think of, every suspicion that had ever crossed my mind. He was like a bloodhound, sniffing out the truth, piecing together the puzzle of James's deception. I also reached out to old friends and acquaintances, people who had known James for years, people who might have witnessed his infidelity or heard rumors of his financial improprieties. I played the part of the wounded wife, seeking sympathy and understanding, carefully extracting information without revealing my true intentions. It was a delicate dance, a game of cat and mouse, but I was determined to win. The more I learned, the more confident I became. James had been living a double life for years, engaging in a series of shady business deals, siphoning off money into offshore accounts, and concealing his assets from me. He had been so confident in his ability to outsmart me, so arrogant in his belief that I would never discover his secrets. But he had underestimated me. He had mistaken my love for blindness. He was about to learn the true cost of his deception. I started to record every phone conversation, every meeting, every interaction with those connected to James. Knowledge was power, and I was accumulating it at an alarming rate. My biggest advantage: they still thought I was broken. They had no idea what was coming. The recordings became my lifeblood. I meticulously transcribed every word, every inflection, every subtle nuance that revealed their true character. I learned about James's mistress, her lavish lifestyle funded by my stolen money, her dreams of a future that would never materialize. I discovered that his brother, Mark, was deeply involved in the financial scheme, acting as a conduit for moving assets and laundering money. And I uncovered a shocking secret about James's father, a prominent judge, who had used his position to protect his son's illegal activities. The web of deceit was far more extensive than I had ever imagined, reaching into the highest echelons of society. I realized that my revenge would not only target James, but would also expose the corruption and hypocrisy that had allowed him to thrive. I needed concrete evidence, irrefutable proof that would stand up in court and withstand the inevitable scrutiny. I focused on the financial records, tracing the flow of money through a maze of shell corporations and offshore accounts. It was like solving a complex puzzle, each piece revealing a new layer of deception. I hired a forensic accountant, a wizened old man with a reputation for uncovering hidden assets and exposing financial fraud. He was a master of his craft, able to decipher the most intricate accounting schemes and uncover the truth hidden beneath layers of obfuscation. Together, we built an ironclad case, documenting every transaction, every transfer, every illegal activity that James and his family had engaged in. We discovered a pattern of insider trading, where James had used confidential information to make lucrative investments, profiting from the misfortune of others. We uncovered a scheme to defraud investors in a real estate development project, siphoning off funds for personal use and leaving the project bankrupt. And we found evidence of tax evasion, where James had deliberately underreported his income and concealed his assets from the government. The evidence was overwhelming, a mountain of incriminating information that would bury them all. I knew that simply exposing their crimes would not be enough. I wanted to inflict maximum damage, to shatter their reputations and destroy their lives. I decided to leak the information to the media, to unleash a torrent of publicity that would expose their treachery to the world. I carefully selected a journalist, a seasoned investigative reporter with a reputation for integrity and a relentless pursuit of the truth. I provided her with all the evidence I had gathered, along with a detailed account of James's betrayal and the conspiracy that had enabled him. She was skeptical at first, wary of being used as a pawn in a personal vendetta, but as she examined the evidence, she became convinced of its authenticity and the gravity of the allegations. She agreed to publish the story, promising to protect my identity and ensure that the truth was exposed. The anticipation was excruciating. I knew that once the story broke, all hell would break loose. James and his family would be furious, desperate to contain the damage and protect their reputations. They would likely launch a counterattack, attempting to discredit me and undermine my credibility. But I was prepared. I had anticipated their every move and developed a strategy to counter their efforts. I had copies of all the evidence stored in multiple locations, ensuring that it could not be destroyed or suppressed. I had retained a team of lawyers and public relations professionals ready to defend me against any legal or reputational attacks, and I had cultivated a network of allies, people who believed in justice and were willing to support me in my fight. The day the story was published, I felt a surge of adrenaline. The world was about to learn the truth about James and his family. The game was about to change forever. The first hint of trouble came in the form of a phone call from Mark. He sounded panicked, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and desperation. He pleaded with me to stop, to call off the journalist, to spare his family from the impending scandal. He offered me money, anything I wanted, if I would just make it all go away. I listened in silence, savoring his desperation. It was a validation of my plan, a confirmation that I had hit them where it hurt the most. I told him that it was too late, that the truth was already out there, and that there was nothing he could do to stop it. I hung up the phone, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. The cracks were beginning to appear in their carefully constructed facade. A few hours later, I received a visit from James. He arrived at my apartment unannounced, his face contorted with rage. He barged in without invitation, his eyes blazing with fury. He accused me of trying to ruin him, of seeking revenge for his infidelity. He threatened me with legal action, with financial ruin, with physical violence. I stood my ground, refusing to be intimidated. I told him that he had brought this upon himself, that his betrayal and his greed had led him to this point. I told him that I was not afraid of him, that I would not back down, and that I would see him brought to justice. He lunged at me, his hands outstretched, his face a mask of pure hatred. I grabbed a can of pepper spray from my purse and unleashed it in his face. He recoiled in pain, clutching his eyes and screaming in agony. I pushed him out the door and slammed it shut, locking him out of my life forever. It was a close call, a reminder of the danger I was in. But it also reaffirmed my resolve. I would not be deterred. I would not be silenced. I would see my revenge through to the end. I checked the hidden camera I had installed by the door, ensuring that the entire encounter had been recorded. Every detail would be used. Nothing would be wasted. I reviewed the footage, ensuring the audio was crystal clear. James's threats were explicit, his anger palpable. This would be invaluable, a piece of evidence that would further solidify their downfall. I spent hours that night preparing for the inevitable backlash. I knew they wouldn't give up easily. They would use every resource at their disposal to try and silence me, to discredit me, to destroy me. But I was ready. I had anticipated their every move and prepared accordingly. I had a team of security experts on standby, ready to protect me from any physical threats. I had a crisis communication plan in place, ready to respond to any media attacks, and I had a network of allies who would stand by me no matter what. I was no longer the naive, trusting woman they had betrayed. I was a warrior, armed with knowledge, fueled by rage, and determined to seek justice. They had awakened a sleeping giant. They were about to learn the true meaning of retribution. I smiled, knowing that the final act was about to begin. The stage was set. The players were in place, and the curtain was about to rise on their ultimate downfall. The news exploded like a shockwave. Headlines screamed accusations of fraud, embezzlement, and corruption. James and his family were front and center, their carefully crafted image crumbling before the world. Social media erupted with outrage, their past misdeeds dissected and scrutinized. The charity event they had so proudly sponsored was revealed to be a sham, a thinly veiled attempt to launder money and boost their public image. Their business empire teetered on the brink of collapse, investors fleeing in droves, and creditors demanding immediate repayment. It was a feeding frenzy, and they were the main course. The most damaging revelation was the evidence of insider trading. I had managed to obtain a recording of James discussing confidential information with his brother, Mark, just days before a major stock market crash. They had used this information to short the stock, making millions while ordinary investors lost everything. The recording was undeniable, a smoking gun that proved their guilt beyond any reasonable doubt. The authorities immediately launched an investigation, freezing their assets and subpoenaing their records. James's father, the judge, was also implicated, accused of using his position to obstruct justice and protect his son from prosecution. The scandal reached the highest levels of government, threatening to bring down the entire political establishment. Their world was unraveling, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Seeing their downfall unfold was intoxicating. Every headline, every accusation, every setback was a victory. But I knew this was just the beginning. The real revenge was yet to come. I needed to ensure that they faced the full consequences of their actions. I wouldn't be satisfied with mere financial ruin or reputational damage. I wanted them to be held accountable for their crimes, to pay for their betrayal, to suffer the same pain they had inflicted on me. I decided to focus on the criminal charges, to work with the authorities to build an airtight case that would guarantee their conviction. I met with the lead prosecutor, a sharp and determined woman who was eager to bring James and his family to justice. I provided her with all the evidence I had gathered, along with a detailed account of their crimes. She was impressed by the thoroughness of my investigation and the strength of the evidence. She assured me that she would do everything in her power to ensure that they were brought to justice. But she also warned me that it would be a long and difficult battle. James and his family had powerful connections and vast resources. They would fight tooth and nail to avoid prosecution, using every trick in the book to evade justice. I knew that I would have to be prepared for a protracted legal battle. I retained a team of top-notch criminal defense lawyers, ready to assist the prosecution and counter any legal challenges that James and his family might mount. I also hired a team of forensic experts to analyze the evidence and provide expert testimony at trial. I was determined to leave no stone unturned, to ensure that justice was served. The trap was set. The plan was intricate, relying on their arrogance and their desperation. I leaked information, carefully crafted to make them believe they could escape the legal noose. I let them think they had found a loophole, a way to discredit my evidence and turn the tables on me. It was a calculated risk, but I knew they would take the bait. Their desperation made them predictable. They underestimated my foresight, my ability to anticipate their moves. The key was James's mistress, Isabella. She had been living a lavish lifestyle, funded by James's stolen money, dreaming of a future as his wife. But as the scandal unfolded, her dreams began to crumble. James cut her off financially, leaving her stranded and vulnerable. I reached out to her, offering her a deal. I would provide her with financial security and protection if she would testify against James. At first, she was hesitant, loyal to James despite everything. But as she realized that he was using her, that he never intended to marry her, she began to reconsider. I played on her resentment, her anger, her sense of betrayal. I showed her the evidence of James's infidelity, his lies, his manipulation. I convinced her that the only way to get revenge was to expose the truth. She finally agreed to cooperate, providing me with valuable information about James's financial dealings and his criminal activities. Her testimony would be the final nail in their coffin. I arranged a meeting with Isabella, ensuring it was in a location heavily monitored, every word recorded. We met at a quiet restaurant, tucked away in a secluded corner of the city. She was nervous, glancing around, afraid of being seen. I reassured her that she was safe, that I would protect her from any harm. We discussed the details of her testimony, rehearsing her answers, ensuring that she was prepared for the intense scrutiny she would face in court. I emphasized the importance of honesty, of telling the truth, no matter how difficult it might be. I reminded her that she was not just seeking revenge but also seeking justice for herself and for all the victims of James's crimes. As we spoke, I noticed a figure lurking in the shadows outside the restaurant. It was Mark, James's brother. He was watching us, his face filled with rage. I knew that they were onto us, that they were aware of Isabella's betrayal. The game was about to escalate. I finished the meeting with Isabella, instructing her to go into hiding, to avoid any contact with James or his family. I promised to keep her safe until she was ready to testify. As she left the restaurant, Mark approached her, grabbing her arm and pulling her into a nearby alleyway. I watched in horror as he confronted her, his voice rising in anger. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see the tension in their bodies, the hatred in their eyes. Suddenly, Mark lunged at Isabella, pushing her against the wall. He raised his hand, his fist clenched, ready to strike. Everything shifted into slow motion. I bolted from the restaurant, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I screamed at Mark to stop, to leave her alone. But he ignored me, his focus solely on Isabella. Just as he was about to hit her, a car screeched to a halt in front of the alleyway. Two men jumped out, their faces hidden behind masks. They grabbed Mark, wrestling him to the ground. Isabella screamed, terrified. The masked men pulled out weapons. It wasn't going to be a beating. It was an unaliving. My trap had just become a slaughterhouse. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The masked men, their intentions horrifyingly clear, were about to permanently silence Mark. I had wanted justice, exposure, the downfall of their empire, but this was a line I never intended to cross. My carefully constructed plan had spiraled into something monstrous, something I couldn't control. I screamed again, a raw, desperate sound that tore through the night air, but it was lost in the chaos. The masked men overpowered Mark, pinning him against the wall next to Isabella. There was a flash of steel, a sickening thud, and then silence. The masked men vanished as quickly as they appeared, disappearing into the night, leaving behind a scene of unimaginable horror. Isabella stood frozen, her face white with terror, her eyes wide with disbelief. Mark lay motionless on the ground, a pool of crimson spreading beneath him. He was gone. My stomach churned, a wave of nausea washing over me. I stumbled back, my legs weak, my mind reeling. What had I done? This wasn't revenge, it was a nightmare. I called the authorities, my voice shaking, reporting the incident but omitting my involvement, painting myself as a horrified bystander. The police arrived, sirens screaming, lights flashing, turning the quiet street into a scene of pandemonium. I gave my statement, carefully sticking to the false narrative, praying that they wouldn't see through my lies. Isabella was taken into custody, a material witness to a horrific crime. I knew she would eventually crack, that she would reveal everything, including my role in setting this chain of events in motion. My carefully constructed facade was crumbling, threatening to bury me beneath its ruins. The news of Mark's unaliving sent shockwaves through the city. The media went into overdrive, fueled by speculation and rumor. The focus shifted from financial crimes to violent crime, turning James and his family into pariahs. James was beside himself, his carefully controlled composure shattered. He publicly blamed me for Mark's passing, accusing me of orchestrating his unaliving, of seeking revenge through violence. He denied any involvement in Mark's past misdeeds, claiming that he was innocent of all charges. But no one believed him. The evidence was overwhelming, the public outrage palpable. The authorities intensified their investigation, scrutinizing every aspect of their lives, uncovering more and more evidence of their crimes. Isabella, broken and terrified, eventually told the police everything. She revealed James's financial wrongdoings, his tax evasion, his insider trading. She also revealed my involvement, my plan to expose them, my role in setting the stage for Mark's demise. I was arrested, accused of conspiracy of manipulating events that led to Mark's unaliving. I maintained my innocence, claiming that I never intended for anyone to get hurt, that I only wanted justice. But it was no use. The evidence was stacked against me, the public perception was that I was guilty. James, his face gaunt, his eyes hollow, watched as his world crumbled around him. His father, the judge, was impeached, stripped of his position, his reputation destroyed. His business empire collapsed, his assets seized, his family name forever tarnished. He was charged with multiple crimes, facing decades in prison. He lost everything: his wealth, his power, his family, his freedom. The trial was a spectacle, a media circus that captivated the world. I was portrayed as a vengeful woman, consumed by hatred, willing to do anything to destroy her enemies. James was portrayed as a ruthless businessman, driven by greed, willing to break the law to get ahead. The evidence was presented, the witnesses testified, the arguments were made. The jury deliberated for days, their decision hanging in the balance. Finally, the verdict was reached. James was found guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. I was found guilty of conspiracy, but the jury acquitted me of the more serious charges. I was sentenced to a few years, a small price to pay for the devastation I had wrought. As James was led away, his eyes met mine. There was no anger, no hatred, only emptiness. He had lost everything. I just smiled. I served my time, reflecting on the events that had led me to this point. I had sought revenge, and I had achieved it, but at a great cost. The satisfaction I had anticipated was hollow, replaced by a sense of emptiness and regret. I had unleashed a chain of events that had spun out of control, resulting in tragedy and loss. I had become the very thing I had set out to destroy. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. But it's a dangerous game, one that can consume you if you're not careful. It's a path paved with good intentions, but often leads to unforeseen consequences. It's a fire that can warm you, but also burn you to ashes. The scars of this experience will forever remain, a constant reminder of the price of vengeance. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.